we had no clue if they were actually going to invade or not, because the whole time Russia was saying, we're not going to invade. We're not going to invade. How do you even negotiate with somebody who's not even being serious with you? The whole time they're saying, we're not going to invade, but also here's our list of demands. I thought you said you weren't going to invade.
Let's move on to the Ukraine stuff.
Okay, that's fine with me. So Ukraine, I'm a big supporter of Ukraine. I'm over in Ukraine. What do you want to talk about?
All right, so all right, this one's a little bit more trickier for me because I'm not Ukrainian. Okay, so
neither am I.
My point is
that helps.
Cool. Okay, well, my problem is NATO. My problem is NATO, and my problem is American ambitions led us here, which you refuse to acknowledge. American military ambitions.
I think if American military ambitions contributed, I think it's like a factor of like 1 to 10.
Burns is
it's like maybe 10%,
morally corrupt,
compared to Russia's 90%. And so I don't talk about it because I don't think it's the primary contributor. The primary goal of the current Russian government's foreign policy is to reestablish dominance over the post-Soviet sphere, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, anything that it used to, that the Soviet Union used to touch. It believes it should have some level of dominion over, including Ukraine, and that robs the sovereignty of more people than even exist in Russia, because that the amount of people that touches is actually a larger amount of people than even in Russia itself. I think that Russia doesn't have a right to all of these people's land. I don't think they have a right to all of these people's destiny. And if these people want to choose a path with the European Union, a path of democratization, if they want to throw off the oligarchs, I think that's their business.
All right. Well, yeah, like I under what do you call it? I can't deny that, but you make it sound like you put it like very naively, because number one, that all those countries you talked about in Central Asia, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, etc., the dictatorships are in Russia's sphere of influence. I don't like those countries to begin with. Yeah, I don't like those countries to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
But
what do you mean by that? By the way, when you say Russia's sphere of influence, what do you mean by that?
They have a military alliance with those countries.
Yeah, when you say sphere of influence, do you just say it as like a statement of fact, or of like that's their thing, so it is what it is?
Like no, it's a statement of fact. They have military alliance and and economic alliances and etc. Yeah. And what was it before? Like, I mean, and because of what happened in Ukraine, because there was a little protest, right now Russia's on edge because, we're saying that, Ukraine's futures with, with the NATO and etc.
Well, when we say that, the Ukrainians are also saying it. All polling data seems to indicate that I think 70 to 80% of Ukrainians want to be within NATO and want to be within the European Union.
Well, yeah, I've talked to I've interviewed some Ukrainians as well, and some of them are not for NATO. And these are not Russian Ukrainians; these are Ukrainians, right? And they're not for NATO.
A big country.
Yeah. Okay. So some people are not as well, and I've seen them also living peacefully, together with Russians outside of the war zone in Ukraine, and most refugees actually. That's why as well I would say that this notion of genocide is nonsense, because most refugees went to I don't know, like 2 million went to Russia, and that's I think 1.5 went to Europe. So Russia took more refugees than anybody else. So that's what I say. If you're genociding people, like you don't take.
I'm sorry. Did I make an accusation of genocide?
No, I'm not you, but the mainstream media.
Okay,
propaganda.
So I'm not gonna make the accusation of genocide. I do think there's an argument to be made, especially when we talk about the kidnapping of children. This was recently brought forward to the woman who orchestrated the kidnapping of Ukrainian children during the Vice interview. We're going to be watching that later on today's stream. But Russia is creating the refugees. Russia is displacing vast amounts of people, and they're doing it on purpose. It's publicly said on their state media channels that the more people they displace, the easier it will be to conquer territory. The more refugees they create, the easier it will be to carve out Ukraine's economy and make them cave into them and surrender. So it's very hard for me to take in any belief of humanitarianism from the Russians when you create the refugee crisis. This would be like, it's almost like, well, hey, America took in a lot of Vietnamese refugees after the end of the Vietnam War. It's like, oh, wow, that's crazy. How did those come to be?
Well, yeah, exactly. So, but we didn't call it what you call Operation Baby Lift. Oh, what happened? Damn it. Hello?
Yeah, I'm
Can
still
you?
here.
Okay, and then my phone shut off. Yeah, so we didn't call Operation Baby Lift when we took on all the kids. We didn't call that genocide, did we? Or we didn't war crime? No, because we felt a little bit guilty. We felt a little bit disheartened, and after the war ended.
Well,
and
the problem was the distinction I would make is that during the Vietnam War, there was never a period of time where the American government said Vietnam doesn't exist. There's no such thing as the Vietnamese. They're actually just Americans in denial. Vietnamese isn't a real language. It's just like some pseudo language made up by some people in the woods. They should actually be speaking English.
The Russians, man, they said the country.
Yes, 100%, 100%.
No, I've never heard that, man. Because
you've never heard them. You haven't been paying attention, man.
No, I've been paying. Maybe some radicals probably said it, but I'm pretty sure Putin
the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, said that Ukraine does not have a right to exist. Russia created Ukraine. During the start of the Soviet Union. It was created as a social construct by Vladimir Lenin. And on Russian state TV, they regularly talk about how the Ukrainian language is fake, how they're self-hating Russians, and they need to be taught to be Russian. And this is part of the what is so nefarious about the kidnapping of Ukrainian children. Many of the Ukrainian children that have come home have given reports about how they were forced to sing Russian songs. They were forced to try to take Russian citizenship. If they shared any pro-Ukrainian sentiment, they were severely punished. I mean, they genuinely believe that Ukraine doesn't have a right to exist, and they're trying to erase that. But this isn't the first time Russia has done something like this. They've done this to a lot of native people all across Central Asia. They've done it to the Tatar community during the Soviet Union.
Oh yeah, well, but what do you call it? And with the help of Ukrainians too. So if you want to put that up, the Ukrainians and the Russians, these two were buddies in their empire. So they fucked over the Tatars together, and Crimea wouldn't be part of Ukraine.
What do you mean they were buddies? Like, subjugated people are regularly recruited into militaries and then used as weapons against other
these were like
people.
What do you call it? No. Like what do you call it? Ukrainians and Russians are like Scottish and English. So it's not what do you call it? So it's like what if the British Empire went and fucked shit up? You can't say I'm a Scotsman. I wasn't part of me. No, like it was you too. So they're saying the Russian Empire. The Ukrainians were right there with them, and and the Soviet Union especially. 3 of the leaders of the Soviet Union were Ukrainian. So Nikita Khrushchev, actually 4 of them actually. Nikita Khrushchev, Leonid Brezhnev, who else was there? Gorbachev and Chekhov as well. Chernikov, I think that's the name, Chernikov. So all 4 of them were of Ukrainian descent, or or half Ukrainian, or that kind of stuff. So you have Ukrainian blood in them. So this was a Slavic empire, like the Russian Empire was Slavic empire. That treated others badly, but these two were together, and the Cossack battalion, which is a Ukrainian battalion, was one of their most feared battalions that went in most of the time in the vanguard to fuck shit up. So to say that Ukraine was a colony of Russia is erroneous. It's at bad, and rewriting history.
No, well, it was a colony of Russia. They banned the Ukrainian language. They tried to discriminate against the Ukrainian language. Many Ukrainian authors had to flee Ukraine, and they had to flee to Austro-Hungary because they were not able to freely practice their poetry. They were not able to freely practice their art. Many Ukrainian political dissidents were murdered by the Russian state for advocating for independence, for advocating for more civil rights, for more civil liberties for Ukrainians. They regularly engaged in brutal murder campaigns across Ukraine. where they went to people who did disagree with the government or did show any resistance to either during the Russian Empire or during the Soviet Union, and they butchered locals who opposed them. I don't want to get into the history of the Holodomor right now because I have a weird feeling we're going to have a very different interpretation of that historical event. But there was many different times where the Russian Empire either abused Ukraine, and the Soviet Union, maybe to a lesser extent than the Russian Empire, but I mean, it's very hard to top the Russian Empire, also mistreated Ukraine.
No, but like these people have the same, what do you call it? They have the same saints. They have the same church. So that's what I'm saying. Like, to say,
well, they don't have the same church. This is a massive issue in Ukraine right now. A massive issue.
No, they did. They separated them right now, but they did have the same church. They did have the same church.
What is the head of the Russian Orthodox Church? What did he say about Ukraine in this war?
What did he say? But
he said that if somebody goes to Ukraine or fighting in the Russian army and dies, they will go to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
It's a crazy statement. This is something you would expect from like ISIS, like an ISIS statement. Like if you go and you fight the Americans and you put a bomb on your vest and go and die, you are guaranteed a place in Valhalla.
Well, I mean, that's just I mean, what do you call it? That's religious rhetoric, man. That doesn't have to be just ISIS. That's religious rhetoric. But when you go into war, that's going to be religious rhetoric. But the point is, though, that but they did have the same church.
You think that's like okay? I mean, that's bad, right? That they're saying that it is a religious duty for you to go to Russia, go to Ukraine, and die and fight the Ukrainians and fight them in a religious war.
Well, this is an existential threat to Russia because as we've heard recently, I mean, even what's your boy's name? The Hungarian guy with glasses.
You mean Adam something?
Yeah, Adam something. Yeah, he was talking about, hey man, okay, we're going to finish up this war, then we're going to break up Russia into little states. And I've seen this as well. I've heard this as well from the Ukrainian intelligence chief. And I'm pretty sure some other, pundits and also government officials have said this kind of stuff. So this is an existential threat to Russia.
Well, the thing is, the Russians are making it an existential threat to them. If they didn't invade you, the Russians, well, if you let me finish my sentence, I can explain what I mean. The Russians invaded Ukraine. They botched the invasion. They didn't manage it well. And now it's not going too well, where they've thrown away a lot of lives, a lot of resources, isolated themselves on the world stage, and now Putin is betting a lot of his political ambitions upon this war. If he knew it was going to go this badly, I do not think he would have pulled the trigger on it. And he's created this existential crisis where if he now loses the war, who knows what happens, what political instability that could cause in the Caucasus, in Chechnya, in Abkhazia, and all these other places that the Russians have troops or soldiers or many view as a continuing occupation. There were Chechens in Ukraine and other places around the world who, if this war is won by the Ukrainians, they might want to go back home and try to reclaim their land, which they see as being butchered by the Russians in the two Chechen wars, where the Russians basically razed the country to the ground. And so if they wouldn't have launched this invasion in the first place, the Ukrainians have done with that. If they didn't launch this invasion in the first place, this existential crisis wouldn't have been created. This existential crisis, and by the way, I don't even know if it's an existential crisis. We don't even know for sure. Nobody knows. If the Russians were to pull out tomorrow, would Russia collapse? We don't really know that. I can imagine a world where the Russians create some justification like, well, we killed all the Azovites in Mariupol, therefore we denazified the country. We took a bunch of the kids, we saved them. It's time for us to go home now and concentrate on the home front. I don't know if it would work well. I probably wouldn't. But there's a scenario where they can try to run that route and try to keep Russia stable enough so it doesn't literally collapse. And when we talk about existential threats to Russia, what about the existential threat to Ukraine, the country that did not decide to be invaded, the country that did not decide to launch this war, who was invaded by the Russians and has its existential existence questioned every single day on Russian state TV as they try to say Ukraine doesn't have a right to exist. It's an artificial state. That is what was the speech that Putin used to launch the war in the first place, was questioning Ukraine's very existence.
Well, Ukraine right now, it sold most of its assets. I mean, its country like wholesale to basically to our corporation, AIG, what's called BlackRock, and etc. So, and it's basically there are I don't know $1 billion in debt to America. So for generations to come, their children are going to pay for that. Their children and their grandchildren are going to pay for that. So, I mean, compared to Russia, which is an empire in itself, and our former rival in the Soviet Union, I think the existential threat of of a civilization and an empire that was that survived for a couple hundred years. I don't know, maybe not a couple hundred, even more than that, is more of a thing than this not even the existential threat of Ukraine. For number one, nobody put Ukraine under nobody put Ukraine's sovereignty into trouble until they decide to join NATO. Because if they didn't decide to join NATO, everything would be copacetic. Because Russia gave Ukraine independence in 1991, not because America told it to do, because they wanted to. So the only problem right now is not the sovereignty of Ukraine.
You're fucking with me. Fuck off. No. I'll give you a second to correct that. Now you're fucking with me. I don't believe you.
All right, go ahead. What are you saying?
The reason Ukraine became independent was because it voted to be independent, and Russia couldn't do shit. They weren't in a state to do anything. They couldn't have stopped Ukraine if they wanted to. They couldn't have stopped Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. The economy was collapsing. When Putin got into power, one of the first things he did was just closing like 2/3 of Russian military bases, because the entire military apparatus, the government apparatus in the Soviet Union, was unbelievably bloated and unable to sustain itself. And we can see this most clearly through the failed Russian invasion of Chechnya during the Yeltsin administration. Chechnya is 1/50th, 1/60th the size of Ukraine, with 1/20th the population, and they failed in their invasion. They had to prepare for another 4 years before Putin gave it another go, and it was still difficult for them to deal with Chechnya. How would the Russians be able to stop Ukrainian secession at that time in 1991? How could they have seriously done that?
Okay, well, look, that's what I have to say. So, number one, they could have held it by force. They might not have succeeded.
If they can't even take Chechnya, how are they going to take?
That's what I'm saying, though. But look, that's what I'm saying. The Gorbachev was a good leader, so he willfully, he saw the writing on the wall. So, and then he peacefully he collapsed the empire.
Well,
so,
it wasn't peacefully. There were actually a lot of killing of protesters, but continue.
All right, but more peaceful. He didn't try to hold them by to their life. Germany and so it was a huge empire. It was Russia itself is a big country, but adding all those other countries it would be a lot. So by force they could have tried to do that. By force as well, and they have nuclear weapons as well. So they could have done that as well. So, but they saw the writing on the wall. So that's why everybody congratulated Gorbachev.
Okay, let's be real. It wasn't a serious option that they would just nuke the Ukrainians into submission as the Soviet Union was collapsing. That wasn't a serious option they could have utilized.
No, not the Ukrainians. No, nuke the Americans and nuke the Europeans to hold it by force. Their falling empire. So like I said, so when their empire is falling apart, to just throw everything under the table instead of just basically bowing gracefully out.
I mean, he could have done it, but it would have been suicidal. It wouldn't have worked.
Well, they were dying anyways. That's what I'm saying. So they could have just done that. So, but like I said, though, so we have to give a little bit of credit to Mikhail Gorbachev, because that's why you won the Peace Prize, anyways, because he did it peacefully, and the Soviet Empire ended. So, and then after that, but after the Soviet Empire ended, there was many malaise because they lost their empire in Russia and Ukraine as well. But we're so arrogant though. After that, after the Soviet Union Empire collapsed, we still kept NATO. After the Soviet Union collapsed, I think America should have moved all its troops out of Europe, because what do you call it? We're still expanding, even before this war, right? We're expanding military bases in Italy. We're expanding military bases in Portugal. I don't know who's going to invade Portugal right now. Russia? No. Is it the North Africans? Is it Algeria is going to invade Portugal? Or is it Algeria is going to invade Italy? So that's what I'm saying. Like, this is what I'm talking about, like the militaristic ambitions of the United States. So after the Cold War ended, we should have given power to the Europeans, whether it's France, Germany, or whoever. Somebody should have taken control over Europe, because there was no reason for this kind of stuff. And this is what you call it, our military and military industrial complex, our ambitions for become number one. I mean, to keep actually the number one place is what led us over here, because they're no longer an empire. I mean, they're like they're force of the region.
Okay, to be clear then, in this recreation of or how it would have played out then is that America abolishes NATO, Russia then decides, because it's so difficult playing alternate history here. It's very difficult to like, this would happen, then this would happen. But it's very hard for me to assume that just because we abolished NATO, that Russian nationalism subsides. People like Putin, if Putin himself didn't come to power, wouldn't come to power, and they wouldn't start saying, we need to assert ourselves on the world stage and bring us back to our glory days. Russia, no matter what, was going to go through an economically tumultuous time. They were going to. Maybe it could have, the dissolution of the Soviet Union probably could have been managed better, but resurgent nationalism after the collapse of the Soviet Union, we saw it happen in Yugoslavia, we saw it happen all across Europe. So it's hard for me to imagine that just because we abolished NATO, that necessarily means that Russia would then be 100% peaceful, and there's no scenario where now they're going to start invading their neighbors again. Where if Chechnya secedes in this world, that they're going to be like, okay, that's fine, Chechnya can be its own country. Or that.
No, that's not what I'm going to say. But I'm just saying, though, like, it would be like we wouldn't have this kind of war, though, right now, though. And
we do not know that, because this is a really big problem for me, is that this war is not just about NATO. In fact, I don't even think that the primary motivator of the invasion necessarily can even be pinned on NATO. Because when the Russians decided to invade Ukraine in 2022, when that invasion came, the February invasion, they had already stopped Ukraine from any NATO ambitions. By them having control of Crimea, and by them having control of 1/3 of Luhansk and Donetsk, by NATO's own charter, Ukraine cannot join. It is impossible for any country that has a military dispute with any other country when it comes to territory, a territorial dispute, to join NATO. On top of the fact that both the French and the Germans, even before the invasion of Crimea, were not going to sign on to Ukrainian NATO membership. In order to have Ukraine join NATO, you have to have every single NATO state agree. Hungary, France, Germany, every single one. You weren't going to get the French to agree, you weren't going to get the Germans to agree, and you certainly weren't going to get the Hungarians to agree. And you need the Turks as well.
Right. Yeah, I got you. But what I'm saying, though, like, even if, if NATO left, we still have a Euro force, though. I mean, the Europeans are not, are not powerless. I mean, France is not a powerless
what
country.
What percentage of the aid to Ukraine is American compared to European?
Well, right now, but I'm just saying, though, if NATO left, I'm pretty sure they would have their own military force there. And probably even Russia would probably join. Who knows?
I mean, if somebody could design a better, stronger mutual defensive pact with all of Europe, I think that's cool. But I also believe that the Euro-Atlantic alliance structure isn't necessarily that bad. I think the idea of America working with Europe and having a defensive pact with Europe is a good thing. It was part of after World War II, it was our investments into Europe that created a lot of the economic success that we see in the United States. In the period of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, it created a boom period in American manufacturing and American consumer goods and selling. It was very beneficial for the United States. And I don't see any reason why we would need to abandon that alliance structure. Maybe you could restructure it in some way that would better be a better representation of the world post the Soviet Union, and you could call it something else maybe, but there would have to be some mutual defensive structure in Europe to dissuade against invasions in the future, like the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And also, you would need to get all of these new countries to join, because the thing is with NATO expansion, a lot of people say it was Washington's ambitions, and certainly there were people in Washington D.C. who wanted to keep expanding NATO, but it was also the Poles who wanted to join NATO. It was also the Estonians, the Latvians, the Lithuanians. It was all these, the Hungarians, even though now they're led by Viktor Orban. At the time, they very much wanted to join NATO, and the majority of Hungarians still want to be in NATO. They wanted to join NATO because they knew that something like what's happening right now with Russia and Ukraine could one day happen to them if they're not careful and they're not part of an organization that could defend themselves.
All right. Well, okay. So let me rebut you on that one. Okay. My problem with this is NATO, right? NATO is the guard dog of America. NATO is to make sure to keep the Europeans down, because from what I've seen, like even going back to history, like NATO helped coup d'etat in Greece. Okay. Like when they had a left-leaning, probably close to socialist kind of type of guy, they did a coup d'etat on that. NATO also sat back and watched Turkey, a NATO member, invade Cyprus and take half of it, while I don't know what they were doing in a military base in Cyprus, because both USA and Britain had a military base in Cyprus, and they were just, I don't know, watching it or drinking tea or whatever while the Turkish invaded and took half of it. NATO also had a secret army of Nazis in Operation Gladio and made sure to kill leftists or any other actors that threatened American hegemony in Europe. Okay, but you can say that was in the Cold War, because we're in a tit for tat with the Soviet Union, another empire. But now, after the Cold War ended, I think the American government has acted abhorrently bad. It has invaded almost a dozen countries. Yeah, all the refugee situation right now, the crisis right now that is happening in Europe. I've visited a refugee center in Iceland, right? 90% of them, you can say, are indirectly or directly at fault, the fault of their refugees because of the fault of the United States government. Venezuelans, sanctions, right? A lot of Venezuelans have saw refugees there. Syrians, we all know about that. Libyans, Iraqis, Afghans.
Wait, back the fuck up. Are you going to say the Syrians are the fault of the United States? Syrian refugees are the fault of the United States?
Yeah,
that's the Assad regime. Wait, are you kidding? Dude, I'm sorry. Okay. Bashar al-Assad.
We have to have another good argument about the Syrian war, but
well, no. Just to be clear, Bashar al-Assad had a protest movement against him. He then murdered some children and some other people, and it pissed off a lot of people. And so then there was defections from his own military that he couldn't keep a hold on, which created the FSA. Then other groups started to enter from the region. And then the country fell apart because his iron grip on power started to fade because people started having bigger ambitions past the Assad's family's rampant corruption, abuses, and civil right and violations in civil rights. The reason of the Syrian civil war started was because Bashar al-Assad is a terrible, terrible, terrible leader, and his government is unbelievably corrupt and unable to deal with the problems that were in Syrian society 2010,
and
2011.
Timber Sycamore?
What?
Operation Timber Sycamore of training jihadists to get into to fight Bashar al-Assad. Because let me tell you a story about me, all right?
I'm sorry. Okay, let me just be clear. Operation Timber Sycamore, whether or not it happened, if it didn't happen, if it did happen. No, I know it happened. But the Syrian Civil War would have happened despite Operation Timber Sycamore, because the Syrian Civil War was already underway by the time Operation Timber Sycamore happened. So the Syrian Civil War was going to happen with or without the United States even existing in the first place. So again, the Syrian Civil War was caused by Bashar al-Assad. He has not given enough blame in Western circles for the war when we talk about this anymore, because there's so much disinformation about this war in particular, and I've talked to so much of the Syrian diaspora community, and the main complaints I get isn't like, oh, I hate how the Americans ruined my country. It's Bashar al-Assad murdered my family, Bashar al-Assad destroyed my home, Bashar al-Assad arrested my brother and they tortured him because he wanted to set up an NGO, but he didn't want to have to give him a little bit off the top. This is the conversations I have with the members of that community. It's not, oh, I hate how America came in and just started the Civil War magically with terrorists.
Okay, well, like, for me, I have personal, what do you call it, stake in this because, what do you call it, I was arrested by the Turks in Akshakale, which is the border between the Kurdish area that was controlled by the Kurds, which I was, anyway, let's just say I was helping them out. And I was arrested by the Turks. And before that, the FBI and the CIA also knew me. But, they let me rot in prison, though, in Turkey. So I have a look at what do you call it. I personally know what the fuck they did over there. I personally know that the Turks opened up the gates of to Idlib and let all sorts of foreign fighters get in there. I also know, like, either the Qataris or the Saudis and all our other friends supported jihadis over there because there's no fucking way that kind of tidal wave of weapons came into that country. So I mean, I personally know. I know all the when I was in prison, I talked to many people as well, whether they be ISIS fighters or etc. So in this situation, I would tell you, man, like, United States started that war, man. They maybe not even started that war.
I'm sorry, man. It's just a lie,
Yeah,
man.
well, like,
Like, because the problem is when you talk about Operation Timber Sycamore, it's going to be like, well, America, funneled weapons to FSA units, and Saudi Arabia funneled weapons. The Turks opened the border. But you know what's never talked about? It's never talked about Russian funneling of weapons. It's never talked about the brutality of the Russian air campaign. You know what's never talked about? The Iranian-backed militias that were sent to go save Bashar al-Assad's ass. Did they start the war? Was it the Iranians? Was it the Russians? No, it's Operation Timber Sycamore. Give me a joke. The reason the war started in the first place was because Bashar al-Assad engaged in another brutal crackdown, just like his father did before him, just like he engaged in 2004 during the football protests in northeastern Syria, just like he did a million other times. And this time, his people had enough. There were defections from the military, not organized by the CIA, organized locally. And then the civil war started, and that's when all the foreign influence came in. Not just from the United States, not just from Saudi Arabia, not just from the Turks, by the way, fuck the Turks, but also from the Iranians and also from the Russians. And it was the Russian air campaign and the Iranian militias which saved Bashar al-Assad. Without them, he would be dead.
Yeah, without them, because we're about to take him out. But anyway, like, what else to say though? What about in Bahrain? Bahrain also, there was a full-fledged, uprising as well by the Shias in the Bahrain. Saudis sent in their tanks. They crushed people. But what happened there? They crushed them, and the protesters, nobody brought in ATGMs, surface-to-air guided missiles.
Absolutely. I think it's terrible. I think our relationship with the Saudi royal family is disgusting. I think our enabling of their actions is disgusting as we look the other way as they engage in human rights abuses across the region. I think it's hypocritical.
But don't you think though a war wouldn't be engulfed like that without us funneling ATGMs, fighters, training fighters, surface-to-air missiles, sending in spies to and other fighters and money and all that kind of stuff? Wouldn't you think like the war would be like, there would be probably an uprising, but it would be touched as soon as possible?
I will say that if it wasn't for Western support for the FSA and support from other regional factors, and it was just the Russians, the Iranians, and the Assad regime, then they probably would have cracked down upon the People's Revolution and cracked down upon any groups that tried to enter from other countries a lot quicker, and they would have garnered control of the country better. But I don't understand why there's this double standard where we're like, oh, look at all this Western support. That's what caused the war. And then we just kind of like ignore the Russians. We just kind of ignore the Iranians. We just kind of ignore what set off the civil war in the first place.
No, the civil war, like I said, to begin with, there were CIA agents implanted there to begin with. They were from the get-go. They wanted to take them out.
The CIA agents were the ones that murdered those kids? Was it the CIA agents that made all the FSA agents defect? Was it the CIA agents that made those protests happen?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, defectors for sure. Yeah, like I'm pretty sure they were offered money for sure.
Where? Do you have a link to that? Do you have any thing?
That's just how shit operates, man. That's just how shit operates. What do you mean? Most of them are living in France or Europe or etc. Well,
you said that we offered them money during those early defections. Do we have anything to prove that?
Yeah, because most of them are living in the States or Europe.
Just because they're living in America doesn't mean that we offered them money to defect.
But I mean, I don't know, man. What can I tell you, man? If you go to another living in the enemy's country and you're saying that, like, I mean, there was no involvement on your part. It's
Political
ridiculous.
dissidents and rebels will often flee the country if the war doesn't go their way. That happens all the time because they don't want to die.
But anyway, Syria right now is a safe place to go. Even you can go and check it out in the Bashar al-Assad area, and nobody's going to hurt you anyway.
They would hurt me. They would not like me.
Well, yeah, but you're still pressed. I mean, they wouldn't like you, but not going to hurt you because you're pressed.
They've killed a lot of journalists.
Not well. They haven't killed vice journalists, and you're an American journalist, so
I'm
I mean,
a freelance reporter with no major news organization. They got away with shooting a lot of journalists on the ground.
Western journalists? I haven't heard about that. Yes. But anyway, I would say, but yeah, but it's a safe place for tourists to go to. I mean, many tourists have went. Baldwin Bancroft have went. What else? Who else have went? And not only that, though, well, you know, the Syrians are allied with the Kurds, right? The Syrian government is allied with the Kurds.
They're semi-aligned with the Kurds. It's pretty complicated. Wait, we're way off the topic of Ukraine, and we only have like 13 minutes left, and then I have to have somebody call in and talk about Sudan.
All right. But yeah, okay, we're finishing off. Yeah. All the refugees. Okay, if you want to take out the Syrians, take them out. You know, about 80%. If you want to take out the Syrians, 80% of them are caused by the.
We were talking about Venezuela and all these other refugees. Can we get back to Ukraine, like the Ukraine topic?
Yeah, I know, but that's what I'm trying to get to, though. I'm just saying, though, America's NATO, America involvement in Europe has not been good. It has put down, Europe. It has brought in like waves of refugees into Europe. And now it has brought in this war into Europe because, like I said, you know, the relationship between Russia and Germany was very copacetic.
So
until recently.
Let's say we had no. Okay, so two things. First off, our relationship with Europe has been very beneficial for them when it came to investments in helping rebuild Europe after World War II. That was extremely beneficial for not only the West Germans, but many countries that were ravaged by the war. Also, our defensive pact made it so a lot of countries that wouldn't have been able to defend themselves on their own, and I do not believe Europe could have defended itself from the Soviet Union without the United States, and it made it so that they could continue to maintain their liberal democracies outside the reach of Joseph Stalin. Now,
yeah, I'm not talking about NATO in the Cold War area. I'm talking about after the Cold War finished. Like that should have been abolished. I'm not talking about Cold War.
Let's say we had no relationship with NATO, with these European countries. How would that have stopped refugees from being caused? How would that have stopped refugees from going to Europe?
No, I said, you know, America's relationship in general, because our invasion.
But if we didn't have a relationship with Europe, that wouldn't mean that these refugees wouldn't still be created.
No, like actually it would, because, you know, if we live in a multipolar world, if we live truly in a multipolar world, that America doesn't have all the headshots, even America is not the head honcho of the Western world. When Americans can't go around invading Afghanistan, Iraq, and all that kind of stuff, because we wouldn't be a coalition. It would be different. Right. So that's why.
If I know anything about Afghan history, we're the only ones that ever invaded that country.
No, but okay, but do you believe? All right, let me just ask you this question though. Do you believe that it is that we should live in a multipolar world, or America should rule supreme? And
I don't think America. I don't think. I like the two options. We live, okay, so I do not believe America should rule supreme and have all the control in all of the world. But I also don't believe that if we were to remove America from the world stage, or we were to develop this multipolar world, then that would necessarily create a more peaceful society or more peaceful world overall. Because I think that the world that a lot of these countries are aiming for, like Russia, for example, is not a multipolar world, which means that everybody kind of works with each other on equal footing and shakes hands and is able to develop better relations based on a multilateral basis within the guise of the UN. And we can just see from Russia's conduct in this war alone that that isn't the case. That in development of that multipolar world, Russia is creating one of the largest refugee crises of the 21st century. We can see with the Taiwanese, with the Chinese and their contribution, their possible contribution to the creation of the multipolar world. They are possibly going to invade one of the densest countries on the planet, Taiwan, which would cause another gigantic humanitarian catastrophe. And so I think that when we talk about this multipolar world that could be created by the Russians, could be created here, it just kind of looks a lot like, I don't know, like pre-World War One. And it wasn't exactly the most prosperous time for the world. It wasn't exactly a time in history where there wasn't a lot of refugees being created. What would stop all these wars from happening or just moving over into more regional struggles?
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm pretty sure there will be like I'm not saying there will be no more wars. I mean, that's an idiotic way to say it, to say things. But there will be no more wars.
But you're saying that
either
like
way,
all these refugees were created, and if America didn't have a relationship with Europe, then there'd be no refugees. It's silly.
no, I'm saying right now. No, I'm saying right now that what do you call it? There's one guy. There's one there's one sole superpower, the reigning supreme, which is America, which is trying to keep that number one spot. Yeah, and it has invaded at least 10 countries, and then coup d'etat since the end of the Cold War. So I mean, America has gone mad, man. I mean, with power.
Russia, during its invasion of Ukraine, in its opening statement, it gave a justification that could be used not only to invade Ukraine, but Moldova, Romania, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, any post-Soviet state. I think honestly, the only reason that they can't do it is because there's a wall in the way, and that wall is NATO.
No, I mean, look what you call it. Even without America or NATO, I'm pretty sure the French, the Germans, and other countries would have built a Euroforce. That's what Macron, I was about to call him Macron, Macaroni. Macron, he said, we should abolish NATO and create our own Euroforce. We should not be like what do you call it?
Okay, that's what the French want to do, but I don't necessarily just because the French want to do it that everybody's going to follow suit. And just because the French want to do it doesn't mean the French are going to want to stick their neck out for the Eastern Europeans. Are the French really going to want to fight a war over Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania without the support of the
man,
United
they invaded, bro. They invaded Russia before, man. They're just as power hungry as America is, man. They still
like
want their own basic power.
1915, like over 100 years ago.
They're still an empire, my guy. A small one, but they're still an empire.
You cannot invade Russia. It's impossible.
I know they're not going to invade Russia, but they still have nuclear weapons.
Different.
I know, but they still have nuclear weapons, submarines, and I'm pretty sure they can build Are you telling me that Europeans cannot build a united front without America? That they need America to help them. That they're such babies.
If you look at the amount of if you look at who's giving the lion's share of aid to Ukraine, I don't know. I mean, they haven't stepped up to the plate enough yet.
Yeah, because we pushed for this war. This is our war to begin with. I mean, nobody wanted this war.
What do you mean we pushed for the war?
I mean, what do you mean? Other people wanted to negotiate. Like even France wanted to negotiate before the war started. They say, but at the end of the day, the people calling the shots are UK and America. So I mean, they wanted to say, okay, man, we're not going to play with this game with Vladimir Putin anymore. We're just going to put.
And what was it exactly that they wanted to negotiate? What was their offer? Because I remember the offer being, we drop our nuclear umbrella status over much of Eastern Europe, which was already just a non-starter. All of the proposals I saw were just non-starters. It was basically, we're holding a gun to Ukraine's head. Here's a list of demands. That's what the Russians did.
Well, but nobody wants to take a negotiation. I'm pretty sure in the West, in the US and UK, nobody wanted to take a negotiation. France wanted to do the negotiation. Germany wanted to do the negotiations. The German general.
Okay, look, I'm sorry. Negotiation in and of itself is meaningless if you can't come to terms. So what was the terms that could have been agreed upon? What proposal was made that was actually a serious proposal that wasn't a non-starter? That would have actually been like, you know what, I think we can consider this. I think this is a reasonable request, and we're willing to accept it on behalf of making sure Russia doesn't invade. Not to mention, we had no clue if they were actually going to invade or not, because the whole time Russia was saying, we're not going to invade. We're not going to invade. How do you even negotiate with somebody who's not even being serious with you? The whole time you're saying, we're not going to invade, but also here's our list of demands. I thought you said you weren't going to invade.
No, but I'm just saying though. But even before that, though, when the German general, he said that Crimea should stay with Russia, and Russia should Russia and Putin deserve respect. He lost his job, the admiral.
Yeah,
that's how fucked up it is. I mean, what do you mean? Just because he's saying that we should give respect to somebody, he lost his job. You see, that's how you.
Wait. Okay, okay, think about what you just said. You said two things. Which one do you think is the statement that I had more of an objection with? Is it that we should respect yeah, okay. It's not because he said we should respect the Russians. I don't have this like hate boner to an extent. Like we just need to like every time we see Putin, we need to flip him off. Like, yeah, I think a general saying we should give them the Crimea is way outside of his purview. That's not a decision for him to make. Number one, he's not a politician. He's not supposed to negotiate that. He's a general. Number two, he's not Ukrainian.
Yeah, but Ukraine are not making the decisions here either, man. Let's not be foolish here. I mean, if you're giving somebody $100 billion, basically you own them and you're making decisions for them.
We do not own the Ukrainian people. If we owned the Ukrainian people, they would have accepted the deal Yanukovych offered them during the Euromaidan, like Victoria Nuland talked about.
No, what do you mean? Like everybody knows that America wants to fight Russia to the last Ukrainian. That's what that. I mean, what do you call it?
I mean, that's a fun catchphrase.
I mean, it's not just a catchphrase. It is more or less the truth because, what do you call it? If we give them $100 billion and basically we own those people because basically they're so in debt to us. I mean, basically, like if you can see like America's relationship around the world, most countries that where we have relationship don't jump if we don't tell them to jump, like in this kind of situations. Turkey, the only country that does that kind of things is Turkey, which is a rebel country, like Erdogan, which is an ally, but he does what he wants when he wants to.
So
but most countries, they have to follow us.
The thing is, Ukraine wants the aid. They're asking us for the aid. They're asking us for the military assistance. You poll the Ukrainian people, they're going to say, yes, we want the aid. We want the ability to win this war. That's what they want. It's in line with what their government wants here, is what their government's pursuing here. And so we're giving them what they want. And now I'm supposed to feel bad about it. I'm supposed to feel bad that I'm having my taxpayer dollars go to defend Ukraine. A lot of this is aid, by the way. I don't even pay it back. And I'm supposed to feel bad that we're owning them.
Yeah, so basically,
by the way, there's going to be nothing to own in a lot of scenarios if the Russians win, because we see how they treat cities, literally wiping them off the face of the earth. There are cities that, like, when it comes to census data and they're just existing anymore, they're gone. Like Papanza, it no longer exists, wiped off the face of the earth. The Russians captured it and said it doesn't exist anymore. Sorry.
Yeah, that's modern warfare.
No, it's not modern warfare. That didn't exist on the same. This doesn't exist on the same scale in every war. A lot of countries have fought wars we didn't wipe off entire cities off the face of the earth. That's Russian war doctrine. That's how the Russians operate. Okay, I'm gonna have to let you go in a second here.
Okay. Yeah, but in closing, I have to say though that I'm against this notion that the neocons have, or even the American government has, that it wants to be the sole superpower and it wants to keep that. Our economy is failing economically wise. Yeah, a lot of countries are rising: Brazil, India, China, etc. So only thing we have is military force, and we're using that to the utmost way. So like I'm just saying, we're causing a lot of damage for everybody. So I think at that sense, we need to stop for that.
If the only thing we have is military force, why were the Chinese so angry when we instituted all those sanctions in relation to like chips and manufacturing of microchips?
No, we have economics too, but I mean, other countries are rising. We're still not going to be the top dog. I mean, what do you call it? People are living the dollar right now, as you can see with the Brazil, China. They're trying to like replace the dollar. So it's going to be sooner or later.
By the way, so I just want to know: are you willing to sacrifice the Ukrainians in just this goal of building the multipolar world, where if the Russians have to butcher this country and just knock it down a few pegs, kill a few 100,000 people, maybe a few million, who knows how long it goes, well, at the end of the day, it creates a multipolar world, so it is what it is.
No, I'm willing to say that, all the American, friends of Ukraine, if they leave and, elect a new government that is neutral, that doesn't stay in NATO or what do you call it, doesn't join Russia, that is neutral, then I'm pretty sure even the Russian would agree with that one, that there will be a new government that is neutral.
That's so. You called me naive earlier in this conversation. That's unbelievably naive, my guy. I mean, they've already annexed like 5 separate provinces in Ukraine. They've explicitly said that they will not be returning those provinces, but that is a non-starter for the Ukrainians.
Yeah, that is a non-starter for the Ukrainians, but that's what I'm saying. But like, I mean, let's see if they can take it back, man. I mean, but well, let's see if they can take it back. But I don't think they can.
If I treated Africa this way, I wonder if you would like give me like a different treatment. If it was like, so we coup one of your guys, it is what it is. Like, get another government. Just stop sucking. Like, would like, it is what it is. Like, let's see if they can, get a government on their own then. Like, stop.
Well, if it was a French puppet government, yeah, I mean, go ahead, do it. I mean, if it was a French puppet government and, the Egyptians say they don't want the French puppet government in my country, I'm good to get rid of the French puppet government because it's doing French biddings first, not my bidding first, because the Ukrainian government is doing Washington's bidding first, not what's good for the Ukrainians.
Washington's bidding first, but you're making that assumption based upon that it is not in the interest of the Ukrainian people, who disagree with you, by the way, to take back their land, which the vast majority of them want to do. And the easiest way for them to do that is to get support from its Western allies, which it has used to regain territory in Kherson, to regain territory in Kharkiv. They've used it to regain over 50% of the territory the Russians captured since February 24th of last year.
50%, really? Come on, man! Don't be like that.
That's that's just a statistical fact.
50. They took over 50% of what Russia took over. 50%.
Yes,
that took over. I'm not invading.
That is a statistical fact. Yes.
They took over like a whole city, like Mariupol. What do you mean? Like, I mean that
the Russians took a bunch of stuff. But a lot of people don't remember how much has been recaptured. They captured a bunch of territory. The Russians captured a bunch of territory around Kiev. All of that was recaptured. They captured a bunch of the stuff in the Kharkiv Oblast. The vast majority of that was recaptured in the Kharkiv counteroffensive. No,
even though Kharkiv is not
the only provincial capital they've captured in the whole war was the capital of Kherson, the city of Kherson, which has been recaptured as the Russians were pushed over the Dnieper River. Yes, over 50% of the territory that they've captured since February 24th has been recaptured by the Ukrainians.
I don't know. But anyway, just okay, I'll give you that one.
Google it if you want.
I mean, I'll Google it, but we'll have to see, though. I mean, they're not going to take over Crimea, but I'm just saying, though, if they want to throw their bodies against against this war machine, which is like, I don't know, 10 times bigger than them, they can. But I'm pretty sure that they don't want to.
I would feel like somebody who was talking so much about the power, like the evils of neocolonialism, and from like, I feel like somebody looking from an African perspective should, know better than anyone that a smaller resistance.
I understand that Ukrainians are fighting for NATO's bidding, which is the number one superpower, which is also fucking us over.
Dude,
NATO's bidding.
You're talking down to Ukrainians. That's what you're doing. You're talking.
No, I'm talking back to NATO. No, I'm talking back to the Ukrainian.
Because when I talk to Ukrainians, you know what they say? Oh, I don't want my family to end up like the families in Bucha did. Oh, I don't want to end up. Because, I mean, I know people who lost people on the mass graves in Izium and shit. And when I talk to them, they're not saying, oh, I want to make sure the Western policymakers get to, polish as much money for Raytheon as possible. They're going to say, I want to make sure that the people are filling up mass graves in my country leave so they can stop filling up mass graves.
Dylan, I'm here with Ukrainian male refugees too, and they don't want to be part of this war as well. A lot of male left as well. They don't want to be part of this war too, and a lot of them that are still in Ukraine are getting dragged to fight the war. They don't want to fight this war. I'm still with like a lot of male refugees too.
The vast majority of Ukrainians polled say that they want to continue to fight till victory. There is no pollster in the world.
Majority. I'm just saying from what I see over here. I'm just saying from what I see over here that the male like refugees here are not for the war. A lot of them are not for the war.
I know a lot of people who are scared to fight. Like personally, I even know a few draft dodgers, unironically, who don't want to serve, but also still support fighting, but they'll still dodge the draft. A lot of people have a lot of personal reasons for not being able to engage in combat. Like, for example, having to take care of kids, being a single father, a million other reasons that could make it so that they don't want to serve on the front.
It could be, but anyway, we'll see how it goes. And
I gotta go because I have to have this conversation about Sudan.
Okay, peace, man. Bye.
Peace. Bye bye.